Good evening, everyone. Welcome to AVPN's first South Asia Impact Capital Festival. I'm Hiral Sarvaiya Chauhan, Manager Partnerships at AVPN, and your MC for this session. We are delighted to have you join us today. For those of you who do not know about AVPN, we are a network of funders and resource providers with over 600 members across 32 markets. Our mission is to move more capital towards impact. We provide social investors like yourselves the opportunity to connect with various stakeholders across markets, learn from one another, and provide opportunities for action. We are sharing the highlights of the day live on Twitter, so do not forget to share your experience with us using the hashtags hashtag AVPN South Asia 2021 and hashtag social impact. A few housekeeping announcements before we move to the program. To download any session resources, please click on the download icon in the agenda page beside the session title. To continue chatting with the speakers and fellow delegates, please make full use of the messaging function. Finally, please note that the session will be recorded and you will be able to access the recording for 3 weeks after the festival. Now moving to the session. While the growing and small businesses suffered vast economic fallout during the corona outbreak, the pandemic has also paved the way to a better and greener normal. Philanthropies are keen to support green recovery models that bring business back on track while making them more climate friendly and inclusive. In this session, we have experts working closely with small and growing businesses, break down green recovery into actionable components, and take us to success stories. A warm welcome to all the speakers. Now I would like to introduce our panel. We have Hari Natarajan joining us as the moderator. Hari has around 18 years of experience in the clean energy sector, especially energy access space in India, and he has been the former CEO of Clean. We also have Karthik Chandrasekhar, founder Sangam Ventures, as one of the panelists. At Sangam Ventures, Karthik has led investments in 8 clean technology startups, bringing game-changing technology and business models to the market. Sangam in 2018 has also set up India's first clean tech incubator, AIC Sangam, in partnership with the Atal Innovation Mission Niti Aayog. Our second panelist is Anant Aravamudha from Wilgrow. He leads Wilgrow's energy practice. His career spans over 2 decades of technology development, product R&D, and most recently, deployment of technology-driven social impact programs. Over to you, Hari.
Thank you very much, Hiral. Uh, Good morning, everyone, or good evening, depending on where you are joining this session from. Um, Firstly, I would like to thank the AVPN for giving us the opportunity to present our views on what the recovery is going to look like and the kind of models that are emerging, and arising out of that, the kind of support that actors on the ground are looking for. Uh, to start off, a lot of people have come through, weathered through the storm of the disruption through most of last year, and are looking at new paths to grow. And there is a lot of attention on this concept of green recovery. However, it's a term that I feel is getting bandied around a fair bit without real substance to that phrase. If you look at in some places, it's just being equated to development again, and you're seeing massive investments in fossil fuel generation, and that's just recovery, economic recovery, but not necessarily green recovery. So a part of this session is about trying to present a view of enterprises and actors on the ground who are focused especially around sustainable energy solutions, but also the larger developmental solutions, and to try and explain what is different about what we're trying to do post the pandemic. And one of the comments that I read somewhere is we were already not on track to meet the SDGs by 2030. But with this disruption of the last year, we've probably set the development agenda back by about 10 years at least, if not more. The data is yet to come on this, and we will probably be bearing the impact of this for years to come. Uh, but we want to look forward with hope. Now that we are out of the immediate challenge, we want to look forward with hope. And that's the perspective that we're coming from, to try and put in perspective what the enterprises on the ground are looking at, what are the ecosystem requirements around the development agenda. And in order to share their views, we have Anand and Karthik. Anand is primarily coming from the perspective of an incubator working with very early stage companies who have come up with innovative ideas and solutions. Karthik wears two hats. Obviously, he's an investor with whom I've locked horns quite often about putting in more money. But Karthik also has moved into the space of incubation and will therefore be bringing both perspectives. Now, just to give a perspective from this, from on the ground realities, Anand, if you could share how have the firms really coped with the disruption from the last year? What have been the learnings coming out of that, and what have been the strategies that firms have adopted in order to weather this storm?
Thanks, Hari. So my organization, Will Grow, as you correctly pointed out, deals with enterprises, startups, which are in the stage of early market traction. So obviously they are beyond the idea and the tech validation, but they are trying to scrambling for kind of getting traction in the market. And these enterprises definitely faced a major hit during the COVID pandemic in multiple ways. I think first and foremost, all of them are looking for these windows of opportunity where their sales peak. A lot of them, since we work in the agri and energy sector, there is a lot of seasonal variation. So these seasonal windows just disappeared. Rabi sowing season is a very important time for sale of things like pumps and so on. That just disappeared, and therefore that market traction, they were still scrambling to kind of to get it. The second is of course availability of funding. A lot of the discussions with funders, financiers, bankers, all of these, went southwards as soon as the pandemic hit. And a lot of investors preferred to kind of go with the existing portfolio, strengthening that rather than kind of looking at new opportunities. So it was a very trying time. I mean, and not to mention, of course, health concerns. We had heard enough cases of, people within our portfolio companies, contracting COVID, or, even unfortunate cases of somebody passing away. So all these, really were trying times, but they've all shown a lot of resilience. I think a lot of these, their business models have got strengthened significantly in terms of optimizing, cutting out burn, cutting out the flab, looking at being very realistic, looking at partnerships. I think everybody now realizes, this, standalone kind of going it alone is not going to work. Looking at very, tying up with people, like-minded organizations, piggybacking on one another to kind of grow. I think some of these things have been the silver lining. And from Will Grow's side, we've been trying to support in all possible ways. We also, in one of our flagship programs, Powering Livelihoods, we initiated an emergency fund, which helped some of these companies, to maintain their burn rate for about 3 months without really looking over their shoulder as to where the next bill is going to come from.
Thanks, Anand. Yeah, in fact, the resilience of enterprises is something quite interesting. So I was discussing with the Clean Network as well. And with over 200 members, I've not heard of any enterprise really shutting down or exiting the business. So that somewhere indicates that, the sector is still very alive and are looking to move forward and grow. Karthik, how about you? I mean, some of the enterprises that you're working with, you've actually invested in. And so they're probably under a lot more stress around targets as opposed to somebody in the early stage going through incubation. So how have they coped with this situation?
It depends. It's such a big, vast difference between companies, Hari. So I think for us, first to your point that you made, right, around the SDG goals, we really think that, not acting on climate change will actually set you back a couple of decades in the next decade if you're not going to act on climate change, right? I think that's the biggest message to be put out there. But in terms of just the last year and COVID, the good thing about green innovators and the clean tech space, which we operate, especially in the inclusive energy kind of space, is bad cash scenarios are a fact of life, right? Like, sorry, I just had a power outage. Bad cash scenarios and power outages, I guess, are a fact of life. So they were kind of ready, right? Like they basically kind of running in like low oxygen environments already. So, kind of COVID was like a little harder. And, some of these companies had basically kind of their bottom fallout, right? Like suppliers kind of not being able to service, as well as kind of customers going away. A great example is a company we work with called Carbon Masters, which does urban waste, solid waste management, right? So they're basically taking solid waste, processing it, and then supplying biogas and fertilizer. And suddenly, one of the biggest sources of solid waste, which is corporates, just kind of disappeared. And the same thing on the other side, the restaurant industry just shut down for a little while. And so they had to really think through how they kind of switch their business model. So kind of looking at different ways to source waste, kind of diversifying the waste sources, but at the same time also kind of talking to cloud kitchens and like some other industries to kind of supply gas, right? The good spot, I think, overall was anything in the rural economy with the reverse migration and everything else. They had like robust fertilizer sales, but a lot of companies in our portfolio and our incubation acceleration programs, which work on the farm to fork supply chains, suddenly we're seeing a big interest from consumers to get something more local directly from the farmers, right? And that really benefited. And what I hope is that that's not just an impact of COVID that will just get normalized back to where it was, but actually, people will move towards less processed food, healthier options, which are, more natural, but also kind of, things. I think Anant had a great example when we were talking about it, like, just looking for like local communities, empowering local communities from a livelihoods, culture, natural resources perspective, right? And I think that's our biggest hope that comes out of COVID is maybe people see more local ecosystems flourish, which kind of is also in itself green.
Thanks, Karthik. In fact, you've already started responding to what my next question was going to be.
Oops.
As this, no, that's good. It actually fits in very well because I wanted to also understand that, from the start of this year and maybe even towards the end of last year, as things have started improving, what do you think in any one or two of the sectors where you are extending support, Anand? What do you think this whole recovery is looking like? What is green about it? What is inclusive about it? What are your thoughts around that?
Sure. Maybe I'll start with a couple of anecdotes or examples that might be best to illustrate this. So one of our portfolio companies, Greenware, which basically uses solar power to completely create fabric and textile. Right. In the early stages of the pandemic, there was a very severe lockdown in India, and a lot of people who are in urban areas, the migrant workers, so to speak, returned back to their native villages. And surprisingly, in the places where Greenware had their units, right, these returning workers, a lot of them skilled textile workers, garment workers, tailors, and with a lot of skills, but were forced to migrate because of lack of job opportunity. And when they came back, they were very pleasantly surprised to find these units up and running, and that they could directly be absorbed into these units, and their skills were commensurately kind of compensated for. And this could only happen because of this decentralized kind of job creation which is happening. And that in turn could happen because the dependence on energy was removed, because these were all kind of solar powered, decentralized renewable energy powered. So I guess, for me, a green recovery definitely has to involve more job creation, at rural and semi-urban areas, and not this whole centralized model of everybody migrating to cities and, all the issues that follow. So that definitely is one. Secondly, I think even extending that example to supply chains, right? A lot of problems were faced in the lockdown because people could not get components from somewhere. And again, one of our entrepreneurs very interestingly told us they make machines which reel silk, and they make all kinds of local varieties of silk. India is very rich in the local silk making tradition, but over time, I think the consumers have forgotten what local silk looks like. They're so used to a mix of imported local products, right? But during the lockdown, the imported products were no longer available, and consumers actually commented, "Oh, these are locally produced." Tussar, which is a very raw silk, which suddenly kind of gained popularity because it was the only one available at the time. But suddenly customers started looking at it and saying, "Hey, this is something which is locally made and available," and the interest got focused on that. So I think this, in a green recovery, there should be a lot of emphasis, as I said, on local job creation, or decentralized job creation, on local supply chains being strengthened. Um, the other aspects I would like to see is a diversification of customer base. In the pre-pandemic days, there was a lot of focus going on, the low-hanging fruit, people you could easily reach. But now, increasingly, as tough times hit, the enterprise are realizing that they have to have a diverse customer base. There's a lot more focus on reaching, for example, women beneficiaries or women customers, and thereby, creating a gender balance from an overall kind of a stability of the business perspective. And last point, which I really see a great thrust, and this is also coming through some government policy, is farm gate value addition. Again, a lot of, in the past, raw material was taken out, processed again in centralized areas like in cities and in tier 1, tier 2 towns. But now again, there's a lot of focus on farm gate value addition, which again enabled by availability of energy and innovations at a rural level. And this in turn makes it much greener in terms of the overall supply chain. So some of these trends are clearly visible during the pandemic, and I hope we are able to latch on and continue those as we move along.
Yeah. So again, Karthik, just building on that point that Anand was talking about. So he quoted this example where people, when they migrated back to their, their hometowns, uh, found employment which matched their skills. Uh, but how sustainable do you think this is? Do you see it getting reversed as soon as things open up? Well, things have opened up to some extent already. Do you see these people coming back? So how do organizations ensure that the kind of skilled manpower or resources, manpower again is
Right.
gender insensitive, how are companies looking at capturing that and not losing that skilled personnel that they're getting today?
Sure. I think we are in the AVPN forum, right? So I think capital has a very short memory, right? So yes, people will try and go back to what was before the pandemic, right? So, but that said, I think there is an opportunity to recognize that between this, trade-off between efficiency and optimization, which is happening in supply chains and everything else, versus resilience, right? In whatever you're building, a certain level of diversification, certain level of distributed operations adds a lot of resilience, right? And this is just not an India story. This is global, right? Like global, concentrations in the fruits and vegetables or meat industry in the US or Europe have seen disruptions in supermarkets, right? So it's not just an India thing, it's just happening globally. And a lot of the people in the ecosystem are coming back and saying, you can do this and you can create monopolies, and obviously a lot of these have policies to be looked at as well. But I think if anybody builds, and assuming not just COVID but that climate change and other things are going to add more risk to businesses in the long term, anybody building for resilience will be rewarded in the long term, right? So if you're looking for a quick exit, yes, go ahead and optimize, and you better get to an exit before something else hits. But if not, then building for resilience means that you're going to be around for a very long time, and hopefully it's going to be very sustainable as well.
Okay, so you're bringing some interesting perspectives here, building for resilience, and then you started off by saying capital has a very short memory. right? So how do we bring that two together? And from that perspective, Anand, again, I don't want to throw it too much off track, but just in terms of some of the things that Karthik is talking about around building resilience, how do we translate this to a language that investors would understand? So would we just tell them, listen, don't focus on scale, for example. It's really about localization, ensuring resilient businesses, but then replicating it across different places. What is the message that we give them? What is the emerging trend that you see? Are enterprises looking at it this way, or are they still looking at the same way that they were looking at it before the pandemic? So I know that's a lot of questions put together, but yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. I think, see, to a large extent, enterprises will be driven by their sources of funding. So I would say that the first step in this direction of building resilience should ideally come from the people who fund some of these initiatives, right? Be it philanthropic funding, be it investments. I think the tone and the rhythm has to be set there, and automatically the people who receive that funding, they will fall into that rhythm, right? So your question, right? How can investors or funders or philanthropists, kind of ensure this resilience? I think one thing, and three of us in our informal discussions have touched upon this many times, Hari, that we need to move away from this whole project funding mode, right? I think a lot of capital, especially philanthropic capital, comes in primarily in a project mode. Okay, hey, can you set this up? Can you reach this many beneficiaries? And obviously that is a fast turnaround time in terms of results, in terms of things to show, in terms of reporting back to the senior management. That's a quick win, so to speak. But then in terms of times of this pandemic, those models completely fall apart, right? Because those projects which are quickly enabled through philanthropic support do not stand the test of the stress test of a COVID like situation. So I would, again, one thing where capital can really play a role is to kind of move away from a project based funding model to a capacity building model, right? To actually bring in, I mean, to enable this funding to strengthen, to bring more resilience into this chain through the various ways that we spoke about, right? It could be in the form of customer based diversification. It could be in the form of more decentralized production. It could be in the form of decentralized supply chains. It could be in the form of localized sources of energy. So there are multiple ways in which I think that capacity building can happen and the resilience being built in. But I think the cadence and the rhythm has to come from the funding side, rather, and enterprises will automatically follow. That's the point number one. I think the second thing, especially if you talk about the ecosystem, and here the ecosystem, I'm not only referring to people who fund, but also the other cogs of this whole ecosystem. I think the interconnectedness is something we have to recognize. Often we focus on one specific path of interest to us without realizing, and COVID has really thrown, the spotlight on how things are interconnected. So while one stream of activity might be working, something else fails and the entire thing falls apart, right? I mean, we have seen this time and again when something doesn't reach us or something didn't happen during the pandemic. And a very good example, I would say, very happy to see. I mean, we do a lot of work around the productive use of energy through our Powering Livelihoods program. And, what we see here is that, when it comes to setting policy, and MNRE, the ministry, is the primary policy setter for this space, the energy policy, of course, comes in, from MNRE, but increasingly, there is a lot of collaboration happening across ministries because there is no point having an energy policy when we are talking about a solar powered cold storage, right? I mean, that alone will not help. You also need to collaborate with, say, the Ministry of Food Processing to have an integrated policy which enables, the energy part of it as well as, the storage part of it, right? These two have to go hand in hand. So I'm saying that interconnectedness has to be recognized. I'm happy to see that, at least in the productive use of energy space, this is being recognized and acted upon. But I hope, and I wish every part of the ecosystem will realize this, that there is a lot of this interconnectedness has to be recognized and actually accounted for.
Thank you, Anand. Actually, that's a really good point. So the draft DRE policy that MNRE came out with is actually trying to see what the interlinkages across almost 12 different ministries and their programs are. Uh, since I am involved in that a little bit, I must tell you that they are very confused because it's such a vast space now that you're talking about, and there is no clarity on how to move forward on it. And again, in this whole thing, since it's being driven by MNRE, which is a much smaller ministry compared to some of the other ministries that they're engaging with, is also a problem of getting the other ministries onto the table into this conversation. So, with the NRLM and Ministry of Rural Development itself, this is a conversation that's been happening now for about 5 years at least, and the whole the whole conversation is around NRLM wanting to see some scale and demonstration, and MNRE saying unless you allow us that opportunity, where are we going to demonstrate the scale? So it's like the chicken and egg problem. But Karthik, again, the same question that I put to Anant again to you. So you spoke about building businesses for resilience around community needs. But what does that translate to for an investor? Yes, they have to be there for the long haul, but how do they evaluate now? What are the metrics by which they decide, okay, this is an investment that I need to make versus this is not? I mean, I know that there are a lot of other things that you look at, but just this message around building businesses for community resilience, what does that translate to?
Look, what that translates to is basically, the second part of what we're talking about, right? The inclusiveness
Yeah.
part of the work that we do. And what we believe is, especially when you're kind of focused so much, and as a government, your first focus is economic development, right? Job creation, sustenance, like, getting like minimum wages, minimum, kind of prices and, rations out to the people. And in that scenario, kind of saying, hey, we want to have inclusive development, and what does that mean, becomes a bit tough, right? So you kind of got to go over the sustainability hump and then get to the inclusiveness part of it. So it's a higher level. And that's where I think like philanthropy can play a big part, right? And what we see is, there is still those, 90% of the population, the billions out there who are disenfranchised, not just as consumers, but also as producers, right? And when the pandemic hit is when people started recognizing that as an opportunity to connect, seeing themselves as part of that community, and kind of seeing also the pain that part of the population went through as they kind of walked their way home hundreds of miles, right? And so I think the idea of what you want to build is basically in the fundamentals of the business, saying, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, what is the vision of the society you want to be in? And then building it, because you might create the best of companies in terms of valuation, but will it survive the test of nature or the planet? And also will it survive the test of like everybody else kind of supporting it, right? Like at some point, we are talking now about big tech and like how evil it is and all of that, but at the end of the day, it got here because there is not a sense of inclusiveness in the work that potentially went in. Not saying that they are evil or anything else. I think the point I'm trying to get across is, if you're not thinking about it in the early days, and this is early days for the companies that we are trying to build, and if you put that in the DNA, I think there's an opportunity to build companies in the long term, which give you the society that you want, right? And also give you the returns that you want. I don't think there is a massive subsidy that you're looking for. What you can't have is basically a capital stack where you're just driven by valuations and then things will solve themselves, right? So the venture capital model of like, hey, how can you get to that unicorn valuation is not going to work. But these are fundamentally good businesses, right? And you can get to exits, you can. So I'm not so worried about like, will it have returns? So we will have maybe lower returns but better returns overall across the portfolio. So I think the main focus is to say, if you don't set what is it that you want as a good company, as a good society, you basically will get what you invest in or pay for, right? So
Okay. Yeah. On a lighter note, when you were talking about building companies that stand the test of time. I remember Harish at Selco often quoting that Selco and Lehman Brothers started at the same time, and Lehman Brothers is no more, but Selco is still standing. So of course they didn't quite make the money that Lehman Brothers did. Yeah. So Anant, you know, so what are some of the new opportunities that you see? We've spoken about building companies for enterprises for resilience and how investors need to look at it. But are there also some new opportunities? I mean, as an example, for me, what was interesting is the whole energy sector providing access solutions on the ground. A really good opportunity that they were able to tap onto is the whole strengthening of the health chains. So primary healthcare centers being strengthened, it came about because of the COVID issue. But thankfully, these are efforts that will actually go beyond that and strengthen the health sector value chains. I heard the Meghalaya government, for instance, has looked at solarization of all their PHCs, and similarly, a few other governments have done that. So, what do you think are the new opportunities that some of these enterprises will be looking at, which also will be useful for investors to know about?
Right. So I think, yeah, we have to seize on some of these positive moments or positive trends during this whole pandemic. And maybe I can outline a couple of them. One, of course, you already touched upon, but this whole awareness of health and well-being, I think that has significantly increased. Of course, you were talking about it from a government and a PHC point of view, but even at an individual level, right? People have become so much more aware about, how important it is to stay healthy and what are the consequences of falling ill, thanks to this COVID. And that change is happening. I mean, in our own house now we purchase so much more of organic vegetable than before, and I think this is something which is happening across the board. So I think our enterprises should really catch on to this trend, and those who are in the kind of fresh produce segment, those who are in the organic segment, those who are using opportunities to do much more kind of catering to wellness through their products. I think it's a great opportunity to latch on to. Second, I would say is that there is a much more awareness of e-commerce platforms and mobile payments at all levels of society. Earlier, this was very much an urban thing, but I've spoken to entrepreneurs who have extensive kind of rural delivery networks, and they say, look, we are getting 3x the number of online requests now than we were getting just pre-pandemic. So there has been, and I'm not talking about tier 2, tier 3, but tier 4 in villages, where earlier this was completely unheard of, but today you have e-commerce networks going deep into these into the rural heartland, which is a very good trend. And again, this is something which entrepreneurs can use to kind of strengthen their supply chain, as well as a new set of entrepreneurs or micro entrepreneurs can come up, who leverage this increased awareness of rural supply chain. So I think these are some trends. I'm sure Karthik and Hari, you would have seen so many more examples. I'll stop there. Maybe some other examples from your respective experiences.
Sure. So I've just been informed that we have a couple of minutes left. So let me throw it to Karthik. Actually, build on what Anant was talking about. What are some of the emerging trends? And from your perspective, if there was one ask that you had for the investor segment, what would that be? And then Anant, you can pitch in immediately after, talk about one ask around enterprise level and one ask around ecosystem level, and then we can probably just conclude with that. Go ahead.
Sure. Thanks, Hari. So I think the only trend I would say is right now we are kind of inching towards a climate change bubble, right? So I think there's going to be, again, a big influx of venture capital and other investors coming in to the investment space, looking at clean tech again, right? And I think being here at the AVPN forum, my request is especially for the venture philanthropies to look at, basically people like us who are kind of thinking of not just climate change, but also looking at inclusiveness, access to energy, and really kind of understand what we are doing and kind of support us, right? I think that's going to be the most important thing to do, because yes, there is going to be mitigation, large scale deployment investments happening. But if we don't kind of act on climate change for everyone, we are still going to have a massive setback in terms of where we are as a society.
Thank you. Anand?
Yeah, I think, from my side, the ask would be, I guess we have been talking about it right through this session, but, I guess all of us sitting here believe that market-based solutions are kind of the scalable and sustainable way to go forward. So I guess my ask to the philanthropic community and the investor community would be to look at market-based solutions, as opposed to kind of one-off grant making opportunities, because, these are the ones which will stay true to the course in the longer run. And of course, yes, I think as I've already mentioned, give enough leeway for kind of capacity building rather than looking at. Of course, look at results as well, but there has to be strengthening of the overall organizations in order to kind of reach that result, while at the same time being resilient, being inclusive, and so on. And organizations like ours, like Will Grow and like Sangam's incubator, I think play an important role in guiding the entrepreneur in that path, because it is a confusing journey where you have to produce results, you have to kind of produce impact, and you have to stay sustainable, resilient, and so on. So there are a lot of parameters that play, and I think guiding organizations or enterprise support organizations do play a critical role in this journey.
Thank you, Anant and Karthik. Just to add my 2 bits before closing, for me, I think a couple of things that came out, moving away from project-based approaches to enterprise-based, and even within that to look at, for me, to look at some form of blended finance, where the soft money actually goes into some of the indirect impacts that are created on the ground, which cannot necessarily be valued purely on a financial basis, because a lot of the costs are not today being captured very well. The climate bubble, I hope there is a lot of money going to come in, but as you rightly point out, if that money is invested in a sensible manner, if it's based on learnings on the ground, would be really good. And finally, yeah, I already see Hiral there. So Hiral, just the last point that I'm making, what would really be good if there was some kind of a common metric by which we went forward. I have seen several enterprises that Anant is talking about who are now bombarded by 10 different directions from 10 different entities which are trying to support them. And they will definitely get lost in the process. So somewhere at a macro level, can we look at similar philosophies, similar investing approaches, so that enterprises are actually able to go down there and deliver on the ground? Thank you both, and thank you once again to AVPN. Back to you, Hiral and Harsha.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Hari, Anant, and Karthik, for an insightful session. We've now come towards the end of this panel. And at this point, I would like to thank the kind support of our festival partners, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, Sesame Workshop India, the Rockefeller Foundation, COVID Action Collab, VNV Advisory Services, British Asia Trust, WPP India CSR Foundation, Catalyst Management Services, and Satwa. To continue chatting with the speakers and fellow delegates, please make full use of the messaging function. And do not forget to share the highlights of this session on social media by tagging us using the hashtag AVPN South Asia 2021 and hashtag social impact. Up next, the session on gender responsive investment for effective climate change implementation is starting in a few seconds. Thank you, and please enjoy the rest of the festival.
Thank you.
Thank you.